nice introduction and a light discussion before we begin. I guess now it's time to begin. We can formally begin with our second half of our session. So for the benefit of our audience, I would like to introduce my next speaker, Dr. Navras J. Aafreedi. He's currently an assistant professor at Presidency University in Kolkata, India, where he teaches several courses such as Jewish history, genocide studies, interfaith relations, and minority studies. And besides being an assistant professor, he's also the research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Global Antisemitism and Policy in New York, and also the fellow of Salzburg Global Seminars, Holocaust Education and Genocide Prevention Program, and the associated Asia Peace Innovators Forum. So Dr. Aafreedi, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you over here, and we are looking forward to your talk on why, despite all our efforts, peace continues to be elusive, an ontological approach to the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Khetrapal, for giving me this opportunity. I was wondering if I have the permission to share my screen.
Yes.
I do, so I'll try to do so. Okay, is my screen visible to all? Okay. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So as is visible on the screen, the topic of my presentation is why, despite all our efforts, peace remains elusive, an ontological approach to the question. One of the most enduring and perplexing questions in human history is why peace is so difficult to achieve, maintain, and sustain. Despite the countless efforts of individuals, groups, and nations to promote peace and prevent violence, and despite the advances in science, technology, democracy, and human rights, the world still faces wars, conflicts, violence, and injustice. How can we overcome them? Many scholars and practitioners have tried to explain this phenomenon from various perspectives, such as political, economic, psychological, or cultural. However, in this presentation, I'll argue that an ontological approach can offer a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of the root causes of the lack of peace. In this presentation, I argue that an ontological approach can provide a useful framework for these questions. An ontological approach is one that focuses on the nature and meaning of being, existence, and reality. It is based on the premise that reality is not given, but constructed by human beings through their interactions and interpretations. Therefore, peace and war are not objective states of affairs, but subjective on account of the meanings that people assign to their situations and relationships. It examines how our assumptions and beliefs about ourselves and others shape our actions and interactions. It also explores how our actions and interactions affect our sense of being and identity. By applying an ontological approach to the question of peace, I showed that peace is not only a matter of external conditions or agreements, but also a matter of internal coherence and alignment. I also suggest some implications and recommendations for achieving and sustaining peace. The first step in an ontological approach to peace is to recognize that peace is not static or objective state of affairs, but a dynamic and subjective experience. Peace is not something that can be imposed or measured by external criteria, such as the absence of war or violence, the presence of justice or human rights, or the satisfaction of basic needs or interests. Rather, peace is something that emerges from within, from the way we relate to ourselves and others. Peace is a state of mind and heart, a feeling of harmony and wholeness, a sense of belonging and purpose. Peace is also a process and a practice, a way of being and acting in the world, a commitment to dialogue and cooperation, a respect for diversity and difference. Peace is not something that we can achieve once and for all. It's something that we need to cultivate and nurture continuously. The second step in an ontological approach to peace is to understand that peace is not only an individual or personal issue, but also a collective and social one. Peace is not something that we can attain or maintain by ourselves, but something that we need to create and share with others. Peace is not only a result of our own choices or actions, but also a reflection of our relationships and interactions. It is not only influenced by our own beliefs and values, but also by our cultural and historical contexts. It is affected not only by our own emotions or feelings, but also by our social and political structures. It depends not only on our own capacities or resources, but also on our environment and ecological conditions. Therefore, peace requires a holistic and integrative perspective that considers the multiple dimensions and levels of human existence. The third step in an ontological approach to peace is to acknowledge that peace is not a given or natural state of being, but a contested and constructed one. Peace is not something that we can take for granted or assume as normal, but something that we need to question and challenge constantly. It is not a given or natural state of existence, but a contingent and fragile one that requires constant effort and vigilance. Peace is not something that we can accept or adopt uncritically, but something that we need to examine and evaluate critically. It cannot be defined or prescribed universally. Instead, we need to negotiate and contextualize it locally. It just cannot be imposed or enforced uniformly. It needs to be adapted and diversified creatively. Therefore, peace requires a critical and constructive attitude that recognizes the complexity and diversity of human reality. The fourth step in an ontological approach to peace is to realize that peace is not a fixed or final goal or outcome, but a dynamic and ongoing journey or process. Peace is not something that we can achieve or accomplish definitively, but something that we need to pursue and practice persistently. It cannot be reached or attained conclusively. Rather, it needs to be explored and experimented continuously. It can neither be secured nor protected permanently, but is something that requires constant renewal and transformation. Therefore, peace requires a flexible and adaptive mindset which embraces change and uncertainty. On the other hand, war is not simply the presence of armed conflict or hostility, but a negative and destructive condition of disharmony, injustice, and suffering. War is not something that happens by accident or necessity, but something that is caused and perpetuated by human beings through their choices and behaviors. War is not a rational or inevitable response to scarcity or threat, but an irrational and avoidable outcome of fear and hatred. War is not a fixed or singular phenomenon, but a complex and multifaceted one that involves various actors and factors. Therefore, an ontological approach suggests that the main reason why peace remains elusive is because human beings have not been able to create and sustain a shared and positive meaning of peace in their collective consciousness. Instead, they have been trapped in a vicious cycle of war that reinforces their negative and violent meanings of reality. To break the cycle and achieve peace, human beings need to change their ontological assumptions and attitudes about themselves and others. They need to recognize that they are not separate or opposed entities, but interdependent and interconnected parts of a larger whole. They need to realize that they are not passive or powerless victims, but active and responsible agents of change. They need to understand that they are not enemies or competitors, but partners and collaborators for a common good. To illustrate this ontological approach to peace and war, I hereby present some examples from different contexts and levels of analysis. At the global level, one example is the United Nations, which was founded after the Second World War with the aim of preventing future wars and promoting international cooperation. The United Nations is based on the idea that peace is not only a matter of security, but also of development, human rights, humanitarian assistance, environmental protection, and cultural diversity. The United Nations tries to create a common vision of peace among its member states and other stakeholders through dialogue, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, peacekeeping, peace building, peacemaking, and peace education. The United Nations also tries to address the root causes of war by tackling poverty, inequality, injustice, oppression, discrimination, corruption, terrorism, proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, climate change, and other global changes. At the regional level, one example is the European Union, which was established after the Second World War with the aim of integrating former enemies into a peaceful community based on shared values and interests. The European Union is based on the idea that peace is not only a matter of avoiding conflict, but also of fostering cooperation, solidarity, democracy, human dignity, and social justice. The European Union tries to create a common identity and culture among its member states and citizens through economic integration, political union, legal harmonization, monetary union, citizenship rights, cultural exchange, and education programs. The European Union also tries to prevent war by promoting dialogue, trust, mutual understanding, and respect among its neighbors and partners in other regions and continents. At the national level, one example is South Africa, which underwent a peaceful transition from apartheid to democracy in the early 1990s with the help of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was based on the idea that peace is not only a matter of ending violence, but also healing wounds, restoring justice, and reconciling enemies. The Commission tried to create a new narrative of peace among the different racial, ethnic, and political groups in South Africa through truth-telling, confession, forgiveness, reparation, and amnesty. It also tried to prevent future violence by addressing the legacy of oppression, injustice, and trauma that had been inflicted by the apartheid regime on its victims and perpetrators. At the individual level, one example is M.K. Gandhi, who led a non-violent movement for India's independence from British colonial rule in the first half of the 20th century. Gandhi based his ideology on the idea that peace is not only a matter of resisting oppression, but also of transforming oneself and others through love, compassion, and non-violence. He tried to create a personal and social change among his followers and opponents through civil disobedience, satyagraha, that is truth force, ahimsa, that is non-harm, swaraj, that is self-rule, and sarvodaya, that is welfare for all, and swadeshi, that is self-reliance. Gandhi also tried to avoid violence by appealing to the conscience and humanity of his adversaries, and by accepting suffering and sacrifice as a means of purification and liberation. An ontological approach is concerned with understanding the nature of existence and reality. Therefore, in addressing the question of why peace remains elusive, despite all our efforts, an ontological approach would focus on examining the fundamental concepts that underpin our understanding of peace and the factors that contribute to its elusiveness. This approach would involve exploring the ontology of conflict and the ontology of peace. Peace is a complex and multifaceted concept that has been defined and understood in various ways by different perspectives, contexts, and traditions. Peace is not merely the absence of war or violence, but also the presence of justice, harmony, cooperation, and human dignity. Peace is a dynamic and participatory process that requires constant effort and commitment from all actors involved. Peace is also a universal value that transcends cultural, religious, and ideological boundaries. One of the fundamental concepts that underpin our understanding of peace is the distinction between negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace refers to the relative absence of direct physical violence or war between parties, while positive peace refers to the presence of social conditions that foster human development, well-being, and potential. According to Galtung, negative peace is the minimal condition for peace, but it does not guarantee the satisfaction of human needs or the prevention of future violence. Positive peace implies the elimination of structural violence, which is the systematic and indirect harm caused by unjust social, economic, and political structures. Positive peace also entails the promotion of human rights, democracy, equality, tolerance, and dialogue among different groups and individuals. Galtung argues that positive peace is the optimal condition for peace, as it creates a culture of peace that respects diversity and promotes cooperation and dialogue. Another fundamental concept that underpins our understanding of peace is the notion of a culture of peace. A culture of peace is a set of values, attitudes, behaviors, and practices that reject violence and strive to prevent conflicts by addressing their root causes, resolving them peacefully, and promoting reconciliation. A culture of peace also involves the cultivation of a global citizenship that respects diversity, solidarity, and interdependence. A culture of peace can be fostered through education, media, arts, science, religion, and civil society. A third fundamental concept that underpins our understanding of peace is the idea of a right to peace. Right to peace is a human right that entails the recognition and protection of the dignity and security of every person and community. A right to peace also implies the responsibility to respect and uphold the rights of others and to contribute to the common good. Right to peace can be realized through the implementation of international law, humanitarian law, human rights law, and environmental law. Peace is a multifaceted concept that encompasses both negative and positive aspects. Peace is also a process that requires constant effort and commitment from all actors involved. Peace is also a universal value that transcends cultural, religious, and ideological boundaries. Some of the fundamental concepts that underpin our understanding of peace are the distinction between negative and positive peace, the notion of a culture of peace, and the idea of the right to peace. Peace is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that can be defined and measured in different ways. Some of the other fundamental concepts that underpin our understanding of peace are the following: structural violence, the systematic and indirect harm caused by social structures and institutions that oppress, exploit, or marginalize certain groups of people. Galtung coined this term to describe the hidden forms of violence that are embedded in the social order and affect the quality of life and opportunities of millions of people. Cultural violence, that is the norms, values, beliefs, and ideologies that justify or legitimize the use of direct or structural violence against others. Galtung defines cultural violence as any aspect of culture that can be used to convince people that violence is necessary, natural, or desirable. Non-violence, the philosophy and practice of resolving conflicts and pursuing social change without resorting to violence or coercion. Gandhi is considered the father of non-violence, as he developed a theory and a method of non-violent action based on truth, love, and self-sacrifice. Peace building, the process of addressing the root causes of conflict and violence and creating the foundations for sustainable peace. Lederach proposes a holistic and relational approach to peace building that involves multiple levels and sectors of society and focuses on building relationships and capacities for constructive change. These concepts are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. For example, negative peace is necessary but not sufficient for positive peace, as the absence of direct violence does not guarantee the existence of social justice or human dignity. Similarly, Positive peace can prevent or reduce the occurrence of direct or structural violence by promoting the culture of dialogue, cooperation, and respect. Non-violence can be seen as a means and an end to peace building, as it offers a way of transforming conflicts and challenging injustices without reproducing cycles of violence. Peace building can also contribute to both negative and positive peace by addressing the underlying factors that fuel violence and create the conditions for peaceful coexistence and development. Violence is generally considered the opposite of peace. Violence is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that has been studied from various perspectives and disciplines. However, despite the diversity of approaches and definitions, there are some fundamental concepts that underpin our understanding of violence and its causes, consequences, and prevention. I will discuss here three of these concepts: power, aggression, and conflict. Power is the ability to influence or control others, resources, or situations. Power can be exercised in different ways, such as through coercion, persuasion, manipulation, or authority. Power can also be derived from different sources, such as physical strength, wealth, knowledge, or legitimacy. Power is often associated with violence, as it can be used to inflict harm or to resist harm. However, power can also be used for positive purposes, such as to protect, empower, or promote justice. According to Galtung, power can be divided into three types: direct, structural, and cultural. Direct power relates to the use of physical or psychological power to achieve one's goals. Structural power refers to the unequal distribution of resources and opportunities in society that favor some groups over others. Cultural power relates to the norms and values that shape people's perceptions and behaviors. Aggression is the intentional behavior that aims to harm or injure another person, animal, or object. Aggression can be motivated by various factors, such as anger, frustration, fear, revenge, or competition. Aggression can also be influenced by biological, psychological, and social factors, such as hormones, personality traits, norms, and culture. Aggression can take several different forms, such as physical, verbal, or relational. Aggression is not necessarily violent, as it can be expressed in non-harmful ways, such as through assertiveness or humor. According to Anderson and Bushman, aggression can be classified into two types: hostile and instrumental. Hostile aggression refers to the impulsive and emotional reaction to a perceived threat or provocation. Instrumental aggression refers to the deliberate and relational action to achieve a desired outcome. Conflict is the perceived or actual incompatibility of a just goals or values between two or more parties. Conflict can arise from various sources, such as scarcity of resources, differences in beliefs or preferences, misunderstandings, or miscommunication. Conflict can also escalate or de-escalate depending on how the parties manage it. Conflict can be constructive or destructive depending on whether it leads to positive or negative outcomes for the parties involved. It can also be violent or non-violent depending on whether it involves physical force or not. According to Deutsch, conflict can be resolved in different ways: by domination, accommodation, avoidance, or integration. Domination refers to the imposition of one's will over another's. Accommodation refers to the concession of one's interests for another's. Avoidance refers to the withdrawal from the conflict situation. Integration refers to the creation of a mutually satisfying solution. These three concepts of power, aggression, and conflict are interrelated and interdependent. They can influence each other and shape the dynamics and outcomes of violence. For example, power can affect the level and direction of aggression and conflict. Aggression can affect the balance and distribution of power and conflict can affect the expression and regulation of power and aggression. Therefore, to understand violence better, we need to consider these concepts holistically and contextually. Peace is a state of harmony and cooperation among individuals, groups, or nations. It is often considered as the ultimate goal of human endeavors and the ideal condition for human to flourish. However, peace is not easy to achieve or maintain. It is constantly threatened by various factors that create conflict, violence, and instability. There are many factors that contribute to the elusive nature of peace. One major factor is the complex and deep-rooted nature of conflicts. Conflicts often have multiple layers and causes, including historical, political, economic, and social factors. These complex issues take time to unravel and address, and many require systematic changes in society and governance. One of the factors that hinder peace is the existence of competing interests and values among different actors. People have different needs, preferences, beliefs, and ideologies that may clash with each other or with the common good. For example, some people may value economic growth over environmental protection or national sovereignty over international cooperation. These differences can lead to disputes, disagreements, or even wars if they are not resolved peacefully. Therefore, one of the challenges for peace is to find ways to accommodate diverse interests and values without compromising the rights and dignity of others. Another factor that impedes peace is the lack of trust, communication, and understanding among parties. Trust is essential for building and sustaining peaceful relationships. It enables people to cooperate, share information, and resolve conflicts in a constructive way. However, trust is often fragile and easily broken by acts of betrayal, deception, or violence. When trust is lost, communication becomes difficult or impossible. People may resort to stereotypes, prejudices, or propaganda to justify their action or to demonize their opponents. Prejudices and biases based on identity, religion, ethnicity, and culture can also fuel tensions and violence. This can escalate the conflict and make it harder to find a peaceful solution. Fourth factor that challenges peace is the presence of structural violence and injustice in society. Structural violence refers to the systematic and institutionalized harm that some groups suffer due to their social position or identity. For example, some people may face discrimination, oppression, or exploitation because of their race, gender, class, religion, or ethnicity. Structural violence creates conditions of inequality, poverty, and marginalization that undermine human dignity and security. It also fuels resentment, anger, and frustration among the victims who may seek revenge or justice through violent means. Additionally, external factors such as geopolitical rivalries and the global arms trade can also exacerbate conflicts, making it difficult to achieve lasting peace. Moreover, some individuals and groups may be motivated by greed, power, or ideology, and may be unwilling to compromise or negotiate. These are some of the factors that contribute to the elusive nature of peace. They show that peace is not a static or natural state, but a dynamic and complex process that requires constant effort and vigilance. To achieve and sustain peace, we need to address these factors through various means such as dialogue, negotiation, mediation, education, development, and human rights. We also need to cultivate a culture of peace that values diversity. Sorry. Just a minute. So to achieve peace, it requires commitment, collaboration, and sustained efforts from all parties. It involves addressing the root causes of conflicts, promoting dialogue and reconciliation, and creating inclusive societies where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Education, awareness raising, and cultural exchange programs can also play a significant role in promoting peace and mutual understanding. From an ontological perspective, peace and conflict are not just surface-level phenomena, but are rooted in deeper structures of human society and consciousness. This approach involves examining the ways in which our current societal structures, such as politics, economics, and culture, contribute to the perpetuation of conflict and hinder the establishment of peace. Now, the factors the ways in which current societal structures contribute to the perpetuation of conflict and hinder the establishment of peace. Those factors are the following. Nationalism. Oftentimes, political leaders use nationalism to mobilize and unite their citizens behind their government. While nationalism can be used for positive purposes, it can also be used to dehumanize and demonize other nations, which can fuel conflicts. Zero-sum game mentality. Politics is often viewed as a competition between different sides, leading to a zero-sum game mentality where one side winning means the other side losing. This mentality can perpetuate conflicts as each side strives to come out on top rather than finding mutually beneficial solutions. Economic inequality. Economic inequality can fuel conflicts as those who feel they are being left behind may become resentful and marginalized, leading to social unrest and potentially violent conflict. Additionally, economic inequality. So additionally, unfair economic policies and resource distribution can lead to economic disputes and tensions between nations or groups. Cultural differences. Cultural differences can also contribute to conflicts as individuals and groups may struggle to understand and accept differing beliefs and values. This can lead to misunderstandings, discrimination, and even violence. Lack of communication and cooperation. Finally, a lack of communication and cooperation between different parties can contribute to perpetuating conflicts. This can occur due to a lack of trust, unwillingness to compromise, or a failure to listen and understand one another. Our current societal structures in politics, economics, and culture can contribute to the perpetuation of conflict and hinder the establishment of peace. Addressing these issues requires policymakers and citizens alike to be aware of the potential negative impacts of the actions and works towards promoting peace and cooperation. Furthermore, an ontological approach would also delve into the nature of human consciousness and the factors that shape our perceptions and experiences of peace and conflict. This could involve exploring the role of values, beliefs, and biases in shaping our understanding of peace and conflict and how these factors can contribute to the perpetuation of violence and division. Now, the factors that shape our perceptions and experiences of peace and conflict. Sorry. Culture. Our cultural background shapes the way we understand peace and conflict. For example, some cultures may view conflict as a natural and necessary aspect of life, while others may prioritize stability and peaceful coexistence. History. Our past experiences and collective memories influence how we perceive peace and conflict. Historical events such as war, oppression, and colonization can have a lasting impact on our understanding of peace and conflict. For example, a person who has experienced war and violence may have a different perception of peace compared to someone who has always lived in a peaceful society. Identity. Our personal identity and the groups or communities we identify with shape our perceptions of peace and conflict. Our cultural, religious, and political backgrounds can all influence how we perceive peace and conflict. For example, a member of a community that has experienced discrimination and oppression may view peace as the absence of violence and the presence of social justice, while someone from a privileged background may perceive peace as the absence of war and a general sense of security, education and exposure. Education and exposure to different perspectives can shape our perceptions of peace and conflict. Exposure to different cultures, religions, and belief systems can broaden our understanding of peace and conflict. Education can also provide us with the knowledge and the skills to manage conflicts peacefully and promote constructive dialogue. Media and communication. Media and communication can also shape our perceptions of peace and conflict. The way conflicts are reported in the media can influence how we understand them. For example, if conflicts are framed in terms of religious or ethnic differences, it may perpetuate stereotypes and biases, while framing them as social or economic issues can highlight the underlying causes of the conflict. Overall, our perceptions and experiences of peace and conflict are shaped by a complex interplay of multiple factors, both personal and societal. Understanding these factors is essential for promoting peace and resolving conflicts in a constructive and sustainable manner. Our cultural background shapes the way we understand peace and conflict. For example, some cultures may view conflict as a natural and necessary aspect of life, while others may prioritize stability and peaceful coexistence. So, I think just a minute, just a minute. So it can be concluded that an ontological approach to the question of why peace remains elusive, despite all our efforts, involves a deep analysis of the underlying structures and factors that contribute to the persistence of conflict, as well as a reflection on the nature of human consciousness and the role that our perceptions and beliefs play in shaping our experiences of peace and conflict. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aafreedi. That was wonderful to understand the ontological background on peace. Maybe we just have time for one question.